She came home late smelling like a hotel lobby in certainty, and I didn't ask where she'd been. I just let the light in my study do the talking, because it meant I'd been awake long enough to stop believing her. Megan Parker was supposed to be home at 9. Not around 9. Not whenever this wraps. 9. That was her language when she wanted the house to run like a calendar invite. At 9:03, I told myself I was in traffic. At 9:17, I checked my phone once, like a man checking the weather, half hoping to be wrong. At 9:41, my gut started doing math. Not emotional math. Pattern math. The kind you don't teach in school because it makes people uncomfortable. I went into my study and turned on the desk lamp. It's a warm, steady light. Makes the room feel honest. I sat down in front of my monitor and opened a blank document, like I was going to work. I didn't type. I just stared at the screen while the story of my marriage kept trying to load, and every time it did, it looked older than it should have. Like software running on an operating system that had moved on without me. Midnight came and went. The house stayed quiet in a way that wasn't peaceful. Quiet like someone had removed something important and hoped you wouldn't notice until morning. At 12:26, I heard her key. No rush, no fumble, clean entry. The kind of calm you get when you've already rehearsed what you'll say. The door clicked shut, heels across hardwood. A pause at the bottom of the stairs, like she was listening for the version of me she expected. Then she walked toward the study. I didn't move, didn't close the laptop. I didn't pretend I was tired. I stayed exactly where I was, lit up by that lamp like a statement. She appeared in the doorway and wore her face the way she always did. Pretty, composed, slightly amused at the world for needing rules. But something else came in with her first. A smell, polished stone, linen, and that sterile sweetness hotels pump through vents to make everything feel expensive and anonymous. And confidence. Not the normal kind. The kind that says, I'm used to getting away with this. Mason, she said soft. You're still up. I watched her eyes land on the lamp, then the monitor, then my hands. Still, empty. Not doing anything that could be explained away as busy. That's when it happened. A tiny flicker. Half a second. The look people get when they walk into a room and realize the script might not be theirs anymore. She recovered fast. Megan always did. Long day, she added like that was the whole thing. I nodded once, slow, like I had time. Yeah, I said. It's been one of those. And I let the light stay on. People think you find out with a lipstick stain or a text that pops up at the wrong time. Sometimes you do. Most of the time it's smaller, cleaner, like a system running in the background. Megan didn't act like a guilty woman. She acted like a manager. Everything scheduled, everything optimized. Our life ran off her calendar like I was a department that needed structure. At first I told myself it was just her personality. High-performing, social, always on. Then I noticed the maintenance. Strategic affection after unexplained gaps. A hand on my chest when she wanted me to calm. Sex that showed up like a reset button after she'd been distant for days. And the phone. The phone was a whole language. The screen angled away. Notifications off. Battery low, excuses that didn't match how often she was glued to it. She'd leave it face down on the counter like it was a rule, not a habit. One night I walked into the kitchen and she swiped up so fast I didn't even see what she closed, just the motion. Like a reflex you don't develop from being private. You develop it from being trained. I didn't confront her, not because I was scared of her, and not because I needed her to confess, because arguments are where liars live. In an argument, facts become feelings. You raise your voice, they raise theirs, and by the end you're apologizing for your tone while they walk away holding the original sin like a shield. I didn't want to fight. I wanted clarity that couldn't be rewritten. So I got quiet. I started building a timeline. Nothing dramatic, just notes, dates and times. Client dinner started at 7 and ended at midnight. Conference call on a Saturday. Girls' night that included a receipt from a valet garage attached to a hotel. I learned her patterns like I was studying a machine. She'd tell the truth in broad strokes and lie in the details. Always the details. That's where reality lives. I pulled our phone records. Not the content, just the numbers and frequency. One number showed up like a heartbeat. Short calls, long calls, calls at times that didn't fit her story. The number belonged to Tyler Reed. I didn't know him yet. I just knew the name because she'd mentioned it once at a company holiday party like he was harmless. New guy, smart, young, kind of cocky. The kind of description that's supposed to sound dismissive but isn't. I did what men should do more often. I didn't rely on instinct alone. I made it actionable. I hired a private investigator with a simple instruction. Confirm, don't create. No hacks. No illegal stuff. No fantasy. I wanted legal proof that could stand in daylight. The photos came back 2 weeks later. Megan in a navy dress I'd seen her wear to board dinners. Tyler Reed next to her. Close enough that their shoulders touched like they'd done it 100 times. His hand on the small of her back as they walked into a hotel like it was normal. Like it was theirs. They weren't running. They weren't hiding. They were comfortable. That was the part that hit harder than any kiss would've. Comfort means repetition. Repetition means choice. I sat in my study again. Same lamp, same chair, and laid the proof out in front of me like a map. There was no rage scream. No punch-the-wall moment. That's movie stuff. What I felt was colder. A shift. The moment you stop hoping you're wrong and start deciding what you're going to do while you're still calm enough to do it clean. Because I wasn't trying to win an argument with Megan Parker. I was making sure that when I moved, it would be final and impossible to twist into a story where I was the unstable one. She stood in my doorway like nothing had changed. Hair is still perfect. Makeup is still intentional. Purse held at her side like a prop she didn't know what to do with now that the scene was different. "You're working late," she said, smiling small. I texted. "Did you not see it?" "I saw it." That was all I gave her. She stepped in a little, trying to reclaim space. Her eyes went to the screen again, like she could read the answer there if she stared hard enough. "What happened?" she asked. "You look serious." I leaned back in my chair, kept my hands visible. Calm body language. A man who isn't about to perform. "Long day," I said. She exhaled like that was normal, like she'd rescued the moment. Then I added, casual, like a line from a meeting recap. "My day ended with 2 employees fired for inappropriate behavior." I didn't watch her face at first. I watched her posture. Tightened. Shoulders pulled in just a fraction. Chin lifted like she needed oxygen and pride at the same time. She started, then caught herself. "That's intense." "MHM. She tried to laugh. It didn't land. "Where?" she asked, too quickly. "Like, in your company?" I turned the monitor slightly, not enough to show her anything, just enough to remind her that there were things on screens she wasn't invited to see. "Work stuff," I said. The silence after that wasn't empty. It was pressure. Because I didn't say her name. I didn't say Tyler Reed. I didn't accuse her. I didn't demand a confession she could edit into a story later. I just let the implications sit there between us like a weight. Her eyes flicked. Once. Toward the hall, toward the stairs, like retreat was suddenly a plan. "Well," she said, voice too bright. "I'm exhausted. I'm going to shower." "Okay." She waited for more. For anger. For questions. For the old version of me that would chase clarity. I gave her nothing. She left the study like she was walking away from something that could bite. When she was upstairs, I stood, turned off the lamp, and walked to the guest room. Not as punishment, as a boundary. I shut the door, locked it, and lay down fully dressed for a minute, listening to the house settle into a new shape. The marriage was no longer the default setting. I didn't leave her room to talk. That's the mistake men make when they're hurt. They think the truth lives in conversation. The truth lives in paperwork. The next morning I moved like it was any other weekday. Coffee, shower, keys. No dramatic pause at the doorway. No last look at the house like I was the one being exiled. My attorney had already prepped everything the right way, clean, legal, boring. The kind of boring that shuts down manipulation. Divorce petition. Financial disclosures started. Temporary orders drafted. My signature is already on it. Not as a threat. as a decision. And the proof wasn't emotional. It wasn't, "I feel like you've been distant." It was timestamps, locations, photos, a timeline that didn't care about her tone of voice. I arranged for the packet to reach her at work. Not because I wanted an audience, because home is where liars negotiate. Work is where reality has rules. Mid-morning, I imagined her walking in with that practice stride. Heels clicking, phone in hand, ready to step into the version of herself that gets praised. Then she'd see it. An envelope on her desk, addressed in plain handwriting. No message. No flourish. No, "We need to talk." Just wait. She'd sit down. Open it like it was nothing. Then the first page. Divorce papers. Second page. My signature already there. Then the photos, hotel entry, the car, the dinner, the way Tyler Reed's hand guided her like he owned the night. That's when the bargaining instinct would kick in. That's what cheaters do when the fantasy collapses. They sprint toward the nearest person they think can rescue them from consequences. She called Tyler. And Tyler, because he was young and brave only when it was free, would disappear the second it cost him anything. I wasn't trying to humiliate her. I was cutting off the stage before she could build it in my living room. Because explanations are where the story gets rewritten. Consequences don't rewrite. They arrive. I didn't call her boss. I didn't send an email blast. I didn't expose her like a teenager posting receipts. I didn't need to. Corporate America has a reflex. You show it risk, it flinches. You show it liability, it moves fast. 2 days after the envelope hit her desk, my attorney forwarded me a short update from a contact on their compliance side. Not gossip, not a rumor. Process. There had been a report. There had been documentation. There were photos that weren't open to interpretation, and there were policies written in clean language for moments exactly like this. It stopped being romantic the second it had receipts. I heard Megan's boss was Mark Sullivan, mid-50s, reputation guy, the kind of leader who smiles in public and turns cold in private when the company's name is at stake. He pulled her aside. Not in front of people. Not in a meeting room with glass walls. Somewhere quiet where he could deliver the message without leaving a scene. From what I was told, his tone wasn't angry. It was embarrassing. Embarrassment is what you get when someone turns your high performer into a problem you now have to explain to a board. Tyler Reed was already gone. That part didn't surprise me. Men like him are loyal to the fantasy, not the fallout. The second HR turns the lights on, they become a ghost. But Megan didn't vanish. Her name was tied to it. Her role made it sensitive. The company couldn't pretend it was just two consenting adults. If there were power dynamics, travel expenses, client optics, or any hint of impropriety that could become a lawsuit later. I kept hearing the same phrase through mutual contacts. Risk management. That's what it turns into. Not heartbreak, not love. Risk management. Meetings. Legal review. People in suits deciding whether you're worth protecting. Somewhere in that process, the board gets mentioned. Not because boards enjoy mess, because boards hate surprises. Megan had always treated stability like a boring baseline, like something she deserved for showing up, not something she had to protect. Now stability was conditional. Now she was a line item. I sat in my study again after I heard all this and felt something I didn't expect. Not joy, not triumph, just empty air where the last illusions used to be. Because this wasn't me destroying her life in a tantrum. This is what happens when you build a double life inside a system that runs on documentation and liability. Once the affair had proof, it didn't belong to her anymore. It belonged to policy. She came home earlier than usual. Not because she wanted to, because her world had changed shape, and she needed something solid to grab. I watched her pull into the driveway through the front window. No anger in me, just focus. The same kind of focus you get when you're moving heavy furniture and you don't want to drop it. I'd already done what needed doing. 2 suitcases, packed with precision. Clothes folded, shoes paired, toiletries bagged. No drama items. No smashed frames. No torn photos. I wasn't trying to punish her. I was removing excuses. Next to the luggage sat an envelope. Inside were keys to a small apartment. Temporary, simple, clean. A place she could land without turning my doorstep into an emergency. There was also a check. Enough to cover deposits and basics. Enough to kill the line, "I have nowhere to go." People hear that and think it's generosity. It's containment. If you leave someone a reason to stay, they'll use it. If you leave them in a crisis, they'll make it your responsibility. And I refused to let my home become a courtroom hallway where she practiced speeches. She got out of the car fast, scanning the porch like she expected cameras, like she expected an audience. Then she saw the suitcases and stopped. For the first time since this started, she looked small, not in a weak way, in a realistic way. Like the ground shifted under her heels. She walked up the steps and touched one suitcase handle like she didn't believe it was real. "Mason," she called, voice tight. "Open the door." I didn't. I stood inside, out of view, and listened. "Mason, please." Silence is loud when someone's used to you responding. She tried again, softer, then sharper. The tone changes were automatic, negotiation, wearing different outfits. I still didn't open the door, because if I opened it, she'd make it a scene. Tears, explanations, blame, rewriting. She tried to turn my house into a stage where she could earn a second draft. I wasn't giving her one. The hardest part wasn't locking her out. The hardest part was admitting the feeling underneath all my discipline. Grief and relief at the same time. I still loved the person I thought she was, but I couldn't keep living with the person she proved she had become. So I let the suitcases do the talking, and I let the door stay closed. The first call came that night. I watched it ring until it stopped. Then another. Then a text. "Can we please talk? Just 5 minutes." 5 minutes is how people drag you into 5 hours. 5 minutes is how they get you to say one soft sentence they can use as leverage. I didn't answer. By day 2, the tone shifted. "I made a mistake. I'm sorry. Please don't do this. A mistake is leaving your keys somewhere. A mistake is ordering the wrong thing at dinner. A mistake isn't building a second relationship inside your marriage and walking into hotels like you belong there." Day 3 was the reframe. "You've been distant too. We both haven't been trying." I felt alone. That's the script. Spread the blame until it's thin enough to swallow. Day 4 came with perfume, even through a screen. She sent a photo of us from last summer. Sunlight, smiles, the version of our life that looked good from the outside. Then, "Remember this? That's us. That's real." It was real. And so was the hotel. Both can exist. That's the part cheaters never want to sit with. By day 5, she tried urgency. Tyler Reed had vanished from her world the moment it got expensive. No more calls. No more brave little messages. The fantasy ran first when the real world showed up. That's when Megan came back toward me. Not out of love, but out of collapse. She wanted her stability back. She wanted her status back. She wanted the man who handled problems so she wouldn't have to feel consequences. She left a voicemail that sounded like she'd practiced it. "Mason, I'm scared. I don't know what's happening at work. I need you. Please, just let me in so we can talk like adults." Like adults. I almost laughed at that part. Not because it was funny, because it was familiar. Megan liked adult language when she wanted compliance. Here's what I did instead. I forwarded everything to my attorney. One line back through him every time. All communication goes through counsel. No late-night debates. No driveway speeches. No emotional hostage negotiations. Because I knew her type. I knew the move. If she could get me in a room, she'd use my empathy as a crowbar. She'd cry, then apologize, then blame, then soften, then rage. Anything to make me respond. Anything to pull me into an endless loop where the ending keeps getting delayed by progress. Silence isn't cruelty. It's containment. It's the only way to keep a clean ending from turning into a long, slow bleed. And that week, while she spiraled and reached and tried on different versions of remorse, I stayed disciplined. Not because I felt nothing, because I respected myself enough to keep the line when it mattered. A month later, the news reached me the way corporate news always does. Quiet, indirect, sanitized. A mutual contact. A short message. A half-sentence delivered like it was weather. Megan was being transferred to the Portland branch. Not a promotion. Not a fresh start. A relocation with a demotion and a pay cut. The kind of move companies make when they don't want a lawsuit, don't want headlines, and don't want you near the same people who watched you fall. They don't call it punishment. They call it organizational needs. I didn't celebrate. I didn't pour a drink and toast to her suffering. This wasn't revenge fan fiction. This was a report. And the truth is, consequences don't always arrive like thunder. Sometimes they arrive like a calendar invite you can't decline. Portland meant cheaper living, smaller role, smaller money, smaller room to pretend she was still the woman who walked into boardrooms like she owned the air. It meant starting over inside a system that now had her labeled. That label doesn't vanish when you change offices. It follows, quietly, like a shadow you can't negotiate with. I thought about the way she used to talk about stability, like it was boring, like routine was for people who settled, like attention was oxygen and anything less felt like suffocation. She treated my steadiness like a resource she could spend. Now she was being reassigned to quiet. A different city, a smaller circle, less noise, less admiration on demand. And that's the part people don't understand about reputations. They don't die in one dramatic moment. They rot in public slowly. One closed door, one careful smile, one conversation that stops when you walk into the room. I sat with that for a minute and felt something close to pity, then let it go. Because pity can be a hook. And I wasn't going back to being hooked. What happened to her wasn't my job to manage anymore. My job was to keep building a life where her choices didn't get to keep echoing through my days. So I did what I'd been doing since the night she walked in and saw my study light on. I stayed quiet. I stayed exact. And I kept moving forward. The divorce didn't end with a shout. It ended with a pen. A Tuesday morning. Gray sky. No soundtrack. Just a clean calendar block my attorney labeled finalization, like it was a dental appointment. I drove alone. That was intentional. I didn't bring a friend to watch. Didn't bring a witness for emotional support. I wasn't walking into a cage match. I was closing a file. In the parking lot, I sat in the car for a moment and noticed something strange. My hands were steady. Not because I was numb. Because I'd already done the hard part weeks ago. The part where you accept reality without needing the other person to admit it. Once you stop waiting for an apology that fixes anything, you get your balance back. The building smelled like paper and stale coffee. The kind of place where people's worst decisions become normal work. My attorney met me in the hallway. He didn't ask if I was okay. He asked if I'd slept, if the numbers matched, if there were any last-minute surprises. I liked that. It was respectful in the way men understand. Treat me like I can handle it, and I will. In the conference room, everything was laid out clean. Documents stacked. Tabs labeled. Lines highlighted where signatures lived. Megan came in a minute later with her attorney. She looked different in a way that had nothing to do with makeup. The confidence was thinner. Not gone. Just less sure of itself, like a suit that doesn't fit the same body anymore. We made eye contact once. There was a moment where her face tried to pick an expression. Regret? Anger? Sadness? Something that might get me to move first. I didn't give her that. I gave her neutral. The same calm I'd used since the lamplit night in my study. Her attorney spoke first. Small talk disguised as professionalism. Mine answered in the same language. Numbers. Assets. Timelines. Terms. Megan kept glancing at me like she wanted me to break character and say something human. That's what she wanted, one sentence she could use. If I said, I never wanted this, she'd carry it like a trophy. If I said, how could you? She'd turn it into a debate. If I said, I'm sorry, she'd twist it into shared blame. So I said nothing until I had to. When the final set of papers slid in front of me, I read them slowly. Not suspicious, just precise. My attorney watched my eyes. Megan watched my face. I could feel her wanting a performance. Tears. A speech. A final argument where she got to claim the role of misunderstood woman and paint me as cold. I denied her all of it. I signed. Each stroke felt less like loss and more like a door clicking shut. When it was her turn, her hand hesitated. A small tremor in the fingers. Not dramatic, just human. She looked up at me again, like maybe I'd stop it by saying her name. I didn't. She signed too. The silence after was the closest thing to closure I'd ever trusted. Real closure doesn't beg to be witnessed. It just happens. Her attorney gathered papers. Mine did the same. Chairs scraped. People stood. Megan lingered half a step behind everyone like she wanted a private moment. Like she wanted to say something that might change the ending. I didn't give her one. I nodded once, not warm, not cruel. A simple acknowledgement that we were two adults leaving a room where the truth had been written down. Then I walked out. Outside, the air was cold enough to feel clean. I sat in my car and didn't immediately turn the key. Not because I was overwhelmed, because I wanted to register the feeling properly. It wasn't triumph. It was space. Space where her chaos used to sit. Space where my mind used to run in circles trying to solve her contradictions. Space where I used to replay conversations looking for the moment I could have handled it better. That space was mine now. The new routine started the same day, because the routine isn't boring when it's yours. It's a foundation. My apartment was smaller than the house, but it was quiet in the right way. No tension in the walls. No staged affection. No pretending. I kept it simple. Clean surfaces. Nothing sentimental on display. A few photos, my parents, my sister's kids, one shot of me and two friends on a fishing trip that had nothing to do with Megan. Morning gym. Not to punish myself. Not to become a different man overnight. Just to remind my body it still belonged to me. There's something honest about lifting weight when your life has been full of lies. The bar doesn't care what story you tell. It only responds to what you actually do. Work, focused. I stopped checking my phone every 10 minutes like bad news was on the screen. If something mattered, my attorney would contact me. Everything else could wait. Nights. Quieter than I expected. The first week, sleep was still a negotiation. My brain would reach for old habits, listening for the door, anticipating the late return, preparing the questions. But there were no questions left. That's the gift of finality. Once the decision is made, your mind stops trying to bargain. Therapy started in the second week. Not because I was broken, because I wasn't interested in dragging poison into my future and calling it strength. My therapist didn't ask me to cry. She asked me to tell the truth. So I did. I told her how I felt grief and relief at the same time. How I missed the idea of my wife more than the woman she became. How part of me wanted to hate Megan because hatred feels powerful. But the real power was refusing to let her stay central in my life. Some days were harder. Random triggers, hotel ads, certain songs, a navy dress in a store window. It didn't send me into a spiral. It just reminded me, healing isn't a switch. It's repetition. I kept the repetition clean. Gym, work, therapy, a few trusted friends who didn't feed the drama. Meals that weren't eaten over a sink. Sleep that slowly stopped being shallow. And one night, maybe 6 weeks after signing, I sat at my kitchen table with nothing playing in the background and realized I hadn't thought about Tyler Reed all day. Not because I forgave him, because he didn't matter. That's the final form of moving on. The villain becomes irrelevant. If I had one thing to tell any man listening, it's this: don't confuse calm with weakness. Calm is often the strongest thing in the room. Calm is what lets you see clearly. Calm is what keeps you from handing your future to someone who already proved they'll gamble it. Refuse the performance. Take the facts. Protect what's yours. Build a life that doesn't depend on anyone else's honesty. And when it's time to walk away, do it with your head up, without begging someone to value what they already chose to risk.